How dare you? The billionaire stormed into his ex-wife's house. But when he saw her feeding newborn twins, his heart shattered. Hi, my beautiful and loyal family. Welcome back to the home where your worth is honored and your strength is celebrated. Mr. Peter's family. May the Almighty rise for every woman who survived storms no one saw, who carried burdens in silence, and who still chose love when the world handed her pain. May the hands that tried to break you become the reason God lifts you higher, and may every tear you cried return as blessings multiplied beyond measure. You are the heartbeat of compassion, the quiet warrior shaped by fire, the fierce soul who turns suffering into wisdom and darkness into light. May your steps be guarded, your spirit be unshaken, and may grace follow your life like a shield no cruelty can pierce. My precious family, your presence here is power. Your unity keeps this home alive. A like is a prayer released. A comment is love made visible. If your heart stands in strength like this video, if your spirit walks in faith, comment, I'm with Mr. Peter. The divorce papers arrived the same day the twins did, but only one of those deliveries broke her. Kendall Henry pressed her palm against the hospital wall as another contraction ripped through her body. The manila envelope in her other hand felt heavier than the babies fighting to enter this world. Through the glass doors of the emergency entrance, she could see families laughing, husbands supporting laboring wives, the ordinary joy of life beginning. She had none of that. The contractions had started while she was signing the final page, sitting alone in her empty apartment with nothing but a pen and the ruins of her marriage. Weeks ago, Trent had served her these papers across their anniversary dinner table at the restaurant where he'd proposed. She could still see the coldness in his eyes, hear the ice in his voice. Sign them, Kendall. Make this easy for once. She hadn't begged, hadn't cried, hadn't explained that the hotel photos his mother showed him were fabricated, that the man in the pictures was an actor Megan had hired, that she'd never betrayed him. Why bother? He'd already decided she was guilty. His mother had made certain of that. Another contraction doubled her over, and the envelope scattered across the pavement. An elderly woman with kind eyes rushed to her side. Oh, honey, how far apart are the contractions? I don't know, Kendall gasped. I just need to get inside. Where's your husband? Your family? The question stabbed deeper than the physical pain. Her family had disowned her the moment Trent filed for divorce. Her mother's voice still echoed in her mind from their last phone call. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. Don't come back here. Her father hadn't even answered her calls after that. Her sisters blocked her number within hours of hearing the news. The Noah family had money, power, connections throughout the city. When they destroyed you completely. Their word meant everything in their social circles, and Megan Noah had made certain everyone knew Kendall was a cheater, a gold digger, a woman of low character who'd betrayed her perfect son. I don't have anyone, Kendall whispered, the admission breaking something inside her chest. The elderly woman's face softened with recognition, not of Kendall specifically, but of the situation. She'd seen this before. She gathered the scattered papers without reading them, understanding exactly what they were just by the way Kendall held them. She helped Kendall to her feet with surprising strength. I'm Rosa. I used to work for a wealthy family not far from here. I know what they do to women like us. She guided Kendall toward the entrance, supporting her weight. You're not alone anymore, baby girl, not tonight. The delivery room was sterile, impersonal, nothing like the birth plan Kendall had created when she still believed in happy endings. That plan had included Trent holding her hand, cutting the umbilical cord, tears of joy as they welcomed their first child together. She hadn't known then that she was carrying twins. The ultrasound revealing 2 heartbeats had come after he'd already filed the papers, already blocked her number, already moved on with his life, as if their marriage had been nothing more than an inconvenient mistake. Instead of her husband, she had Rosa, a stranger with compassion, and a nurse who kept asking about the father until Rosa finally told her to stop. He's not coming, Kendall said through gritted teeth as another contraction peaked. He's never coming. When Jacob entered the world, his cry shattered something inside her that she didn't know could still break. Then Joseph followed minutes later, both boys perfect and screaming and alive and absolutely his. The nurse placed them on her chest, their tiny faces still red and wrinkled, and Kendall saw Trent in every single feature. The same nose that she'd kissed 1,000 times, the same chin she'd traced with her fingers in the darkness of their bedroom, the same dark curls already visible on their damp heads that reminded her of how he looked in the mornings before the world got to him. They looked just like their daddy, Rosa observed quietly from her position in the corner, studying the babies with an intensity Kendall didn't understand yet. Kendall kissed each tiny forehead, tasting her own tears mixed with the salt of birth. Their father chose his mother over us. We'll choose ourselves over him. Rosa stepped closer, her weathered hands gentle as she touched each baby's head, in what looked like a blessing. My late husband always told me to see people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. Your husband will regret this. They always do. But by the time he comes crawling back, you make sure you're too strong to need him. I don't have anything, Kendall said, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. The reality of her situation was finally hitting. No money beyond what was left in her personal account. No family who would take her calls. Nowhere to go once the hospital discharged her. No job because she'd quit to prepare for the babies, believing Trent when he said he'd take care of everything. No money, no family, nowhere to go. Rosa smiled, something mysterious flickering in her dark eyes. Come home with me. I have a small house in Riverside. It's not much, but it's yours as long as you need it. And baby girl, I have something else too, something that family I worked for doesn't know about, something that's going to change your life. That night, discharged from the hospital with her sons bundled against her chest in blankets the hospital provided, Kendall followed Rosa to a modest house on a quiet street lined with oak trees. The neighborhood was peaceful, far from the glamorous estates where the Noah family lived, far from the judging eyes of the society that had embraced her as Trent's wife and discarded her just as quickly. The house was small but immaculate, filled with photographs of a handsome man and Rosa at various ages, memories of a life well lived and a love that had lasted. Real love, Kendall thought, not whatever she'd had with Trent. Rosa made tea while Kendall nursed the babies, her body aching, her heart shattered but somehow still beating with a stubbornness she hadn't known she possessed. The Noah family, Rosa said carefully, setting a cup in front of Kendall. I was their maid for decades. I watched that boy grow up, watched Megan raise him to worship her opinion above everything, even his own heart and his own mind. She wanted him to marry her niece Sophia. You never stood a chance against that kind of manipulation, honey. She'd been planning it since he was born. You worked for them? Kendall's voice was hoarse. Until I retired, they thought I was just a simple maid living paycheck to paycheck, dependent on their generosity. Rosa's smile turned sharp, almost predatory. They didn't know my husband was smarter than all of them combined. Samuel invested in companies before they became giants. When he died, he left me more than the Noahs paid me in decades of service. Kendall stared at her, unable to process this information on top of everything else. Why are you helping me? Because I watched Megan Noah destroy marriages before yours. Good women who loved that boy and got crushed under her heel. Rosa placed a hand on Kendall's shoulder, her grip firm. I stayed quiet because I needed the job back then. I'm not staying quiet anymore. You rest tonight. Tomorrow, we talk about your future. And sweetheart, it's going to be a lot brighter than you think. As Kendall lay in the guest room with her son sleeping beside her in a borrowed bassinet, she made herself a promise that felt like a vow, like something sacred. She wouldn't be a victim of this. She wouldn't be broken by Trent's betrayal or his mother's cruelty. She wouldn't let this moment define her or her children's lives in any way except to make them stronger. Somewhere across the city, Trent was probably celebrating his freedom with his mother, toasting to his narrow escape from a woman he'd been convinced had betrayed him. Planning his future with Sophia, the cousin Megan had chosen for him since childhood, living his life as if Kendall had never existed, as if the babies sleeping beside her weren't his flesh and blood. Let him have his ignorance. Let him have his perfect life built on lies. She would build something better from the ashes he'd left behind, and when he finally discovered the truth, when he realized what he'd thrown away without a second thought, she would make sure she was standing so tall he'd have to crane his neck just to see her face. Jacob stirred in his sleep, and she placed her hand on his tiny chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. These boys would know their worth. They would know their mother fought for them when their father walked away without looking back. And someday, when they were old enough to ask about him, she would tell them the truth without bitterness. Their father was a coward who destroyed first and asked questions never. But she was the woman who rose from that destruction and built an empire from nothing but will and the kindness of strangers. The future started now. Chapter 2. The Fortune in the Attic. She came to Rosa's house with nothing and discovered the old woman had been sitting on a fortune the Noah family never knew existed. Morning light filtered through lace curtains as Kendall woke to the sound of her sons fussing in their bassinet. Her body ached from delivery in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her heart ached from abandonment in ways she'd never imagined possible. But her hands were steady as she lifted Joseph from the bassinet. This was motherhood. This was survival. This was the beginning of everything that mattered now. Rosa was already in the kitchen when Kendall made her way downstairs, coffee brewing, and something that smelled like cinnamon and warmth baking in the oven. The normalcy of it felt strange after the chaos of recent weeks. "You didn't have to cook," Kendall said, settling into a chair at the small kitchen table to nurse Joseph, while Jacob waited his turn, his little fist waving in the air. "I wanted to." Rosa poured coffee into a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Wife," and set it within Kendall's reach. "We need to talk about your future, baby girl, and it starts with something I've been keeping secret for a very long time." Over the next hour, as Kendall fed her sons and tried to process her new reality, Rosa revealed a truth that shattered every assumption about the kind old woman who'd rescued her from the hospital steps. Rosa's late husband, Samuel, had been a porter on Wall Street decades ago, back in the early days when tech stocks were considered risky gambles that serious investors avoided. While wealthy men in expensive suits ignored him, treated him as invisible, he listened to their conversations about market trends and investment strategies. He learned their techniques, studied their patterns, and invested his modest savings in companies they laughed about over their expensive lunches. He bought Amazon when people thought online shopping was a fad that would never replace the experience of real stores. He bought Apple when everyone said computers were a niche market for hobbyists and would never be mainstream. He bought Microsoft before most people owned personal computers or even understood what software meant. "Samuel died over a decade ago," Rosa said quietly, pulling out a leather folder from a drawer that looked like it had been waiting for this moment. The folder was filled with stock certificates and account statements that made Kendall's eyes widen. "He left me everything. These stocks are worth millions now. I stayed working as a maid for the Noah family because I liked earning my own way, keeping my dignity and my independence. But I never needed their money after Samuel passed." Kendall stared at the papers, unable to process the numbers she was seeing. The accounts showed balances that seemed impossible for someone who'd lived as modestly as Rosa did. "Rosa, I don't understand why you're showing me this." "Because I'm making you my heir." Rosa's voice was firm, no room for argument or discussion. "I never had children. Samuel and I tried for years, went through every treatment available back then, but God had other plans for us. Now I'm looking at you with these beautiful babies, nowhere to go, no family to support you, and I'm thinking, maybe this is why. Maybe you're the daughter I was meant to have all along. I can't accept." "You can, and you will." Rosa pushed the folder across the table, her weathered hands shaking slightly. "This house is paid for. The stocks generate dividends regularly. I'm setting up accounts in your name tomorrow, putting you on all my investments. You're going to use this money to build something, Kendall, Not just for yourself, but for those boys. You're going to show the Noah family exactly what they threw away." Kendall looked down at Jacob, now nursing contentedly, his little hand wrapped around her finger. The weight of Rosa's offer was overwhelming. "I don't deserve this." "Deserving has nothing to do with it. You need it, and I have it, and I'm old enough to do whatever I damn well please with my money." Rosa's eyes were fierce. "Besides, I have a condition." "What condition?" "You go back to school. Online classes, night classes, whatever works with the babies. You finish that business degree you told me about in the hospital. You build yourself into someone so formidable that when Trent Noah finally realizes his mistake, you'll be untouchable." Kendall felt something shift inside her chest, something that felt almost like hope. "Why do you believe in me? You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you didn't beg him when he served those papers. I know you didn't break down when your family abandoned you. I know you walked into that hospital alone and terrified, but you didn't quit." Rosa reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That's all I need to know. You're a fighter, baby girl. Now I'm giving you the weapons to win." The next weeks passed in a blur of feeding schedules and online enrollment forms and learning to be a mother while grieving the future she'd imagined. Rosa was patient, teaching her everything from how to manage stock portfolios to how to burp a baby properly. The house filled with the sounds of infant cries and laughter, two women building a family from the broken pieces of their separate lives. Kendall enrolled in online business courses through a university program designed for working mothers. She studied during naps and late at night when the boys finally slept. Rosa watched them when Kendall needed to focus, treating Jacob and Joseph like her own grandchildren. "You have a gift," Rosa said one afternoon, reading an essay Kendall had written about crisis management in family-owned businesses. "This is brilliant, raw, but brilliant." "It's personal experience," Kendall said dryly, burping Joseph over her shoulder. "The best lessons usually are." Rosa set down the paper. "I've been thinking. My church has connections throughout the city. Wealthy families who trust our community. What if I introduced you as a consultant? Someone who helps families navigate difficult transitions." "Who would hire me? I have no credentials yet." "You have something better. You have the story of how a powerful family tried to destroy you and failed. People respect survival." Rosa smiled. "And with my investment advice, we'll make sure you look the part." That night, after the boys were asleep, Kendall stood in Rosa's attic looking at boxes of Samuel's old business books. One volume caught her eye, Building Empires from Nothing. She pulled it down, dust coating her fingers. Inside the front cover, Samuel had written, "For Rosa, who taught me that real wealth is measured in character, not currency. Build something that matters." Kendall held the book to her chest and made a decision. She would build something that mattered. Not for revenge, though that would be sweet. Not for money, though Rosa's generosity had given her that foundation. She would build it for her sons, so they would never question their worth, never doubt that they came from strength. And if Trent Noah ever discovered what he'd lost, if he ever realized the twins existed and came looking for them, he would find a woman who didn't need his apologies, or his money, or his regrets. He would find Kendall Henry, empire builder. The transformation had begun. Chapter 3. The Lie That Shattered Everything. Megan Noah had destroyed one woman to get her way. Destroying a second seemed like simple mathematics. The art gallery opening was everything Kendall had worked toward. Months of building her consulting business, months of online classes and late nights, and learning to be both mother and entrepreneur, all leading to this moment. She stood in the corner wearing a dress Rosa had insisted on buying, navy blue and elegant, watching her first major client network, with the kind of confidence that came from knowing she'd saved his company from a hostile takeover. "You're brilliant," Richard Langston had told her during their final meeting. "My family's business was falling apart because my mother and my sister couldn't stop fighting. You came in and made them talk to each other like human beings. I don't know how you did it." Kendall knew how. She understood family warfare in a way most consultants only studied in textbooks. She'd lived it. She'd survived it. And now she was turning that pain into profit. The twins were thriving now, growing from helpless infants into toddlers with personalities that made her laugh and cry in equal measure. Jacob was bold, demanding, always pushing boundaries. Joseph was gentle, thoughtful, observant. Both carried their father's features, a constant reminder of what had been lost and what she'd gained. Kendall Henry? A woman's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to find a stunning blonde in a red dress approaching, champagne glass in hand. The woman looked familiar in that way wealthy people often did, perfectly styled, expertly made up, reeking of old money and privilege. "I'm Sophia Bennett. I've heard incredible things about your work." The woman extended her hand, her smile warm. "Richard won't stop talking about how you saved his family business." They shook hands, and Kendall felt something cold slide down her spine. Sophia Bennett. The name was familiar, but she couldn't place why. "I actually wanted to ask you about taking on another client," Sophia continued. "My aunt has been having some family difficulties, and I thought, Sophia, there you are." Kendall's entire body went rigid. She knew that voice, had heard it in her nightmares for months. Megan Noah swept into view, elegant in black, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Kendall. The recognition was instant, and the hatred that flashed across Megan's face was almost physical. "You!" Megan hissed. "Aunt Megan?" Sophia looked between them, confused. "Do you two know each other?" Kendall said nothing. She'd learned in the past months that silence was often the most powerful response. She simply met Megan's gaze and waited. Megan recovered quickly, her expression shifting to something Kendall recognized immediately, calculated cruelty masquerading as concern. "Sophia, dear, this is Kendall Henry. She used to be married to your cousin Trent." The emphasis on "used to be" was deliberate, designed to shame. Sophia's eyes widened, pieces clicking into place. Of course. Sophia Bennett was Megan's niece, the woman Megan had always intended for Trent. "I should go," Kendall said, setting down her champagne glass. "Running away?" Megan's voice was loud enough to carry. Several people turned to look. "That's what you're good at, isn't it? Running away and playing victim." Kendall felt eyes on them now, the weight of attention from people who mattered in this world. Her client Richard was across the room, frowning. This was professional suicide if she let it continue, but if she engaged, Megan would twist everything. "Excuse me," Kendall said firmly, moving toward the exit. "I tried to reach out to you," Megan called after her, voice rising with practiced theatrical pain. "I tried to make peace for Trent's sake, and you humiliated me, told me terrible things about my son." Lies, all lies. But Kendall had learned that truth didn't matter when people wanted to believe the fiction. She kept walking while Megan's performance continued. "I came to you as a mother trying to heal wounds, and you attacked me, in public, said horrible things about my family." Kendall made it to her car before the shaking started. She sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the steering wheel, and tried to breathe through the rage. Megan had just planted seeds of doubt in the minds of everyone who mattered in her professional world. Her client had witnessed it. Potential clients had witnessed it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard. What was that about? Before she could respond, another text came through from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Sophia. I'm so sorry about my aunt. She told me you cheated on Trent. Is that true?" Kendall threw her phone into the passenger seat and drove home, tears of frustration finally falling. When she walked through Rosa's door, the older woman took one look at her face and knew. "What happened?" "Megan," Kendall said. "She saw me, saw that I'm doing well. She couldn't stand it." Rosa's expression turned dark. "What did she do?" Kendall explained the gallery incident while Rosa listened, her face growing harder with each detail. When Kendall finished, Rosa was quiet for a long moment. "She's scared," Rosa finally said. "You're not supposed to survive what she did to you. You're not supposed to build a business and look like you do and carry yourself with that kind of confidence. You're supposed to be broken. She's going to destroy my reputation. No, baby girl, she's going to try. There's a difference. Rosa stood, moving to her desk. I told you I have connections. Tomorrow I make some calls. Wealthy families talk, and I know things about the Noah family that Megan would pay a fortune to keep quiet. Rosa, I don't want to fight dirty. She already is fighting dirty. You're just going to fight smart. Rosa pulled out her phone. But tonight, you rest. Go check on those babies. They don't care about gallery drama. They just care that their mama comes home. Kendall climbed the stairs to the nursery, where Jacob and Joseph slept in their cribs, peaceful and unaware. She stood between them, one hand on each small back, feeling their breath rise and fall. Somewhere in the city, Megan Noah was probably celebrating her small victory, believing she'd put Kendall back in her place, planning more attacks, more ways to destroy the woman who dared to divorce her precious son and then had the audacity to thrive afterward. What Megan didn't know was that she'd just made a critical mistake. She'd reminded Kendall that the war wasn't over, that as long as Megan drew breath, she would work to destroy anyone who threatened her control over Trent's life. And this time, Kendall wouldn't fight fair. This time, she had Rosa's connections, her own growing reputation, and the fury of a mother protecting her children from a woman who would poison their lives the moment she got the chance. Kendall kissed each sleeping boy's forehead and whispered a promise. She'll never hurt you. I'll make sure of it. In the morning, she would call Richard and explain. She would use Rosa's connections to quietly spread the truth about Megan's pattern of destroying women. She would document everything, build her case, and wait for the perfect moment. Because Megan Noah was about to learn a hard lesson. You don't come after a mother's livelihood when she has nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Chapter 4. The Truth That Burns. He came to deliver rage, and left carrying the weight of 2 lives he'd abandoned. Trent Noah had been drinking for hours when his mother finally told him about the gallery incident. She'd waited until the night before his wedding to Sophia, waited until he was vulnerable and stressed and desperate for everything to just be perfect. I tried to make peace with her, Megan said, dabbing at fake tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. For your sake, darling. I went to her at that art gallery, tried to apologize for any misunderstandings between us, and she verbally attacked me in front of everyone. Trent's hands tightened around his whiskey glass. Kendall did what? She said terrible things about you, about our family. She's still so angry, Trent, so bitter and consumed with revenge. Megan's voice trembled perfectly. I just wanted closure before your wedding. I wanted to know she was okay, that she'd moved on. But she's not okay. She's vengeful and cruel. The alcohol made everything sharper and duller at the same time. Trent had spent months trying not to think about Kendall, trying to convince himself that divorcing her had been the right decision. His mother had shown him proof of her infidelity, photos of Kendall with another man at a hotel, receipts, witness statements from hotel staff. The evidence had been overwhelming, but sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, he remembered the way Kendall had looked at him when he served the divorce papers. Not angry, not defensive, just devastated. And somehow that was worse. She needs to know she can't keep harassing you, Trent said, standing up. The room swayed slightly. She can't keep ruining your life just because hers didn't work out the way she planned. Trent, maybe don't go tonight. I'm going. He grabbed his keys, ignoring his mother's protests that were just a bit too weak to be genuine. She needs to hear what I think of her. She needs to know I've moved on completely. The drive to Rosa's address, he'd kept tabs, of course he had, took longer than it should have because he kept having to refocus on the road. The house was small, lights on in the downstairs windows. His wedding was tomorrow, and here he was, drunk and furious and about to confront his ex-wife. He should turn around. He knew he should turn around. He got out of the car instead. The door opened before he could knock. An elderly woman stood there, someone he vaguely recognized from his childhood. Rosa. She'd been their maid before retiring. "You're drunk," Rosa said flatly. "I need to see Kendall." "She doesn't want to see you." "I don't care what she wants." Trent pushed past Rosa into the house, his anger giving him false confidence. "Kendall, get out here!" He stormed into the living room and stopped dead. Kendall sat in an armchair, a baby at her breast, nursing quietly. Another baby slept in a playpen nearby, swaddled in blue blankets. The room smelled like powder and milk, and something else, something that triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. Kendall looked up at him, and her eyes were cold as winter. "Get out of my house." "Your house? This is Rosa's." But his words died as he really looked at the baby she was holding. Dark curls, his nose, his chin. The baby turned slightly, and Trent saw his own eyes looking back at him from a tiny face. "What?" His voice broke. "Who? You want to yell at me?" Kendall's voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that came before devastating storms. "Go ahead. Yell at me in front of your sons. Show them exactly who their father is." The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. "My what?" "That's Jacob I'm feeding. Joseph is sleeping in the playpen." Kendall adjusted the baby in her arms with practiced ease. "Your sons, Trent. Born the same day you had your lawyer serve me the final divorce papers, the same day you celebrated your freedom." Trent's legs stopped working. He grabbed the back of the couch to stay upright. "You're lying." "Am I?" Kendall stood, walked over to him with deliberate slowness, and held Jacob out. "Look at him, Trent. Really look at your son." He took the baby automatically, his large hands awkward around the small body. Jacob was warm and solid and very real, and he had Trent's face. There was no denying it, no mistaking it. This was his child. These were his children. "How? I don't... You never told me. You blocked my number the day you filed for divorce," Kendall said flatly. "You refused to see me when I came to the house. Your mother had security escort me off the property when I tried to tell you I was pregnant. You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with me. But a baby, babies..." Trent looked down at Jacob, who had started fussing. "Kendall, I would have, if I'd known..." "Would you?" Her voice was sharp as broken glass. "Would you have believed me? Or would your mother have convinced you I was lying about that too? That I'd gotten pregnant by my affair partner and was trying to trap you?" The accusation hit too close to home because he could hear his mother's voice saying exactly that. He'd believed her about everything else. Why wouldn't he have believed that too? "The photos," Kendall continued, her voice deadly quiet. "The hotel receipts, the witness statements. Did you ever question them, Trent? Did you ever ask yourself why a woman who loved you desperately would suddenly cheat? Your mother hired an actor. She fabricated everything, and you believed her without asking me a single question." The room tilted. "No, she wouldn't." "She did, because I wasn't good enough for her precious son, because she wanted you to marry Sophia, and I was in the way." Kendall's eyes blazed. "And you let her destroy us." "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." Kendall walked to a desk and pulled out an envelope. "DNA test results. Rosa made me do them when the boys were born. She said someday you'd need proof that you're exactly who I always knew you were, a coward who destroys first and asks questions never." She threw the envelope at him. It hit his chest and fell to the floor. Trent carefully handed Jacob back to Kendall. The baby was crying now, upset by the tension, and picked up the envelope with shaking hands. The letterhead was from a legitimate medical lab. The results were clear. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. These were his children. He'd divorced his pregnant wife based on fabricated evidence. He'd left her alone to give birth to twins. He'd spent months believing she'd betrayed him while she was raising his sons alone. He'd planned a wedding to another woman while his children grew without him. The room spun, and it had nothing to do with the alcohol. "Kendall," he started. But she cut him off with a gesture so dismissive it hurt more than any slap could have. "You have a wedding tomorrow. Sophia's waiting. Your mother's waiting. The venue is set. The guests are arriving." Her voice was arctic, emotionless. "Don't let me keep you from your perfect life. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. You chose to believe the worst of me because it was easier than questioning your mother." She turned away from him, swaying Joseph gently while Jacob calmed against her shoulder. "Now leave. You're scaring your sons." It was true. Both babies were crying now, sensing the tension, and Kendall was comforting them with an ease that spoke of countless nights of practice, nights he'd missed, first smiles gone forever, first laughs that would never echo in his memory. "Kendall, please." "Please what?" She turned back to him, and he saw tears in her eyes for the first time. "Please forgive you. Please understand. Please make this easy for you." Her laugh was bitter and broken. "You chose your mother over me without asking a single question. You threw away our marriage like it meant nothing. You served me divorce papers while I was carrying your children. You left me with nothing and no one. Rosa took me in when my own family refused to answer my calls. She was there when your sons were born. Where were you, Trent? Celebrating your freedom, planning your next wedding?" Every word was a knife, and he deserved each cut, deserved to bleed from them. "I'll cancel the wedding," he said desperately. "I'll make this right." "You can't make this right. You can never make this right." Kendall's voice broke completely. "Now get out of my house before I call the police. You have no rights here. You signed them away when you signed those divorce papers without giving me a chance to defend myself. They're my sons. They're nothing to you." Her shout startled the babies, and she lowered her voice, but the fury remained like a living thing between them. "You're nothing to them. A stranger, less than a stranger. You're the man who abandoned their mother. Now leave." Rosa appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, screen already lit with emergency services ready to dial. "Leave, Trent, before I make that call for her." He looked at Kendall one more time, at the babies in her arms, at the life he'd thrown away without realizing it existed, at the woman he'd loved who'd become someone harder, stronger, unbreakable. Then he turned and walked out, the DNA results clutched in his hand like an accusation. He sat in his car in the driveway for over an hour, staring at the papers, watching through the windows as Kendall moved around inside with their sons. She looked tired but powerful, beautiful and untouchable. She looked like she'd built a life without him. She looked like she didn't need him at all. And that, Trent realized as he finally drove away into the night, was the real punishment, not knowing he had children, but knowing they had a mother who was more than enough. Chapter 5. The Man Who Burned It All Down. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but Trent Noah served his mother's ruin at a temperature that melted steel. Trent didn't go home. He drove straight to his lawyer's house, banging on the door before dawn until lights flickered on and Harvey appeared in his bathrobe, ready to call the police. "I need you to cancel my wedding," Trent said without preamble. "What? Trent, you're getting married in hours. The venue is set. The guests are flying in. I don't care. Cancel it. I'll pay whatever penalties. Just make it stop." Trent pushed past him into the house, pulling out his phone. He found Sophia's number and typed out a text before he could second-guess himself. "I can't marry you. The reason doesn't matter. I'm sorry. I'll cover all costs." Harvey was staring at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe finding out you'd abandoned your pregnant wife and twin sons while you planned a new wedding would do that to a person. "I need something else," Trent said, pulling out the DNA results. "I need to know my legal rights regarding my children. I need to know how to fix this." Harvey's eyes widened as he read the document. "Trent, these children are... How old? You had no knowledge of their existence?" "None. My mother made sure of that. She fabricated evidence of an affair, hired an actor, doctored photos, created an entire lie to destroy my marriage." Trent's hands were shaking. The alcohol was wearing off, replaced by a clarity that hurt worse than any hangover. "And I believed her." Where is Kendall now? Living with Rosa Bennett, my mother's former maid. Rosa took her in when Kendall's family abandoned her. Each fact was another knife. She's been raising my sons alone while I planned a wedding to someone else. Harvey was quiet for a long moment. Trent, family court isn't going to look kindly on this situation. You divorced your pregnant wife. I know. You've had no contact with these children. I know. Your chances of getting custody. I don't want custody. Trent's voice was hollow. I want to be their father, but I don't deserve custody. She does. She's the one who kept them alive, kept them safe, built a life for them when I threw her away like garbage. Harvey studied him carefully. What do you want me to do? First, kill the wedding, quietly if possible, but thoroughly. Second, I need you to help me figure out how to approach this legally without making it worse. Third, Trent stood, his jaw set with grim determination. Third, I need you to come with me to my father's house. It's time to have a conversation with my mother. Dawn was breaking as Trent and Harvey pulled up to the Noah estate. His father's car was in the driveway, which meant both parents were home. Good. They could hear this together. Trent used his key to enter, moving through the familiar hallways with Harvey behind him. He found them in the breakfast room, his mother reading the society pages, his father working through financial reports, the picture of perfect, wealthy domesticity built on lies. "Trent!" His mother jumped up, smiling. "You're here early. Did you want to go over the ceremony details one more time?" Sophia called in a panic about, "There's no wedding," Trent said flatly. His mother's face paled. "What? Trent, don't be ridiculous. Everything is set." "I said there's no wedding." He pulled out the DNA results and threw them on the breakfast table, watching her face as she recognized what they were. "Congratulations, Mother. You have grandsons you'll never meet." His father picked up the papers, scanning them quickly. "Trent, what is this?" "That's proof that Kendall was pregnant when Mother convinced me she was cheating, that she gave birth to twin boys, Jacob and Joseph, the same day I finalized our divorce." Trent's voice was cold, controlled, because if he let himself feel the rage fully, he'd destroy this entire room. "That's proof I'm a father, and I didn't know because Mother made sure I didn't know." Megan was shaking her head. "I didn't. She never told you." "She tried," Trent roared, making both parents flinch. "She tried to reach me, and your security threw her off the property. She tried to call, and I blocked her number because you told me to. She tried everything, and you made sure I never heard her." His father was staring at Megan now, realization dawning on his face like a horrible sunrise. "Megan, what did you do?" "I protected our son. That woman wasn't right for this family. That woman gave birth to my children alone." Trent was breathing hard, trying to maintain control. "While I was here planning a wedding to Sophia like nothing happened." "Sophia was always meant for you," Megan said desperately, her mask cracking. "It's what we planned, what your uncle and I agreed on." "I don't care what you planned." Trent turned to Harvey. "Do it. Everything we discussed." Harvey pulled out documents, setting them on the table one by one. "Mrs. Noah, effective immediately, you are removed from the board of Noah Enterprises. Your trust fund has been transferred to Trent's sole control. Your access to all company credit cards and accounts is revoked. You are no longer authorized to make any decisions regarding company business or finances." Megan stumbled back, hand to her chest. "You can't. Richard, tell him he can't." But Trent's father was reading the documents and his face was stone. "He can. He's CEO. The company is his to run as he sees fit." "There's more," Trent said, his voice deadly calm. "You're moving to the guest house. The main residence is mine now. And if you ever try to contact Kendall or my sons, I'll file a restraining order that will make you a social pariah in every circle you care about. I'm your mother. You were my mother. Now you're just the woman who destroyed my life." Trent gathered the DNA results. "Harvey will finalize everything today. I suggest you start packing." He turned to leave, but his mother's voice stopped him, no longer wheedling but venomous now that her tears hadn't worked. She won't take you back, Megan spat. You think destroying me will make her forgive you? She hates you. She'll never let you near those children. You've lost them forever. I know, Trent said quietly, not turning around. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because you deserve it. Because you destroyed a good woman and innocent children for your own selfish reasons. Because you made me into someone I despise. He walked out, hearing his mother's protests behind him, his father's angry questions finally coming after decades of passive complicity. Let them fight. Let them figure out what their marriage looked like when the lies were finally exposed. Trent drove to his own penthouse downtown, the place he'd been living since the divorce. It was sterile, impersonal, filled with expensive furniture that meant nothing. He walked to the balcony and looked out over the city toward the neighborhood where Kendall lived with his sons. His phone buzzed, messages flooding in as word of the cancelled wedding spread. Sophia's family threatening lawsuits, society friends demanding explanations, his own phone lighting up with questions he had no energy to answer. He ignored all of it and called his lawyer again. Harvey, whatever Sophia's family wants, pay it. I don't care about the amount, just make it go away. Trent, they're talking about significant financial compensation. I said pay it. He ended the call and threw his phone on the couch. Then he sat in his empty penthouse and finally let himself cry for everything he'd lost. His marriage, his sons' early lives, every first moment that would never come again. Kendall's trust, the future he'd thrown away because he believed his mother over the woman he'd promised to love forever. Outside his window, the city woke up to news of the scandal. The cancelled wedding was already trending on social media. The Noah family drama was being dissected by people who didn't know them, didn't care about the real human cost. Inside, Trent Noah learned what real loneliness felt like. And miles away, Kendall Henry fed her sons breakfast, unaware that the man who'd destroyed her had just destroyed himself. And she didn't care. Tactus, Chapter 6. The Siege That Failed. He thought persistence was love. She knew it was just another form of control. The first check arrived by courier service on Monday after Trent cancelled his wedding. $100,000 made out to Kendall Henry with a note in his handwriting. For Jacob and Joseph, please. Kendall stared at it for exactly 10 seconds before calling her lawyer. Send it back, she told Harrison Ford. Yes, that was actually his name, and yes, he'd heard all the jokes. Return it with a letter stating that the children are well cared for and require nothing from their father. Kendall, Harrison said carefully. He'd been her business lawyer and had become her friend over the past months. You don't have to reject support out of pride. It's not pride, it's principle. Kendall watched the twins playing in their playpen, Rosa supervising while humming an old hymn. He doesn't get to buy his way into their lives. He doesn't get to throw money at the guilt and call it fatherhood. Legally, you're required to accept child support if he files. Then let him file. Let him stand in front of a judge and explain where he's been. Her voice was cold. Send the check back, Harrison. Today. The check was returned by week's end. The next gift arrived days later. 2 boxes, both massive, filled with designer clothes for toddlers, expensive toys, everything 2 boys could possibly need. The delivery man needed Rosa's help to carry them inside. Kendall didn't even open them. She called a local children's charity and had them picked up that afternoon, but not before calling a local reporter friend who owed her a favor. The headline ran the next morning. Local businesswoman donates designer children's gifts from Trent Noah to city shelter. Her phone exploded with calls. She ignored them all except one. That was harsh, Harrison said, though she could hear the approval in his voice. That was necessary, Kendall corrected. He needs to understand that this isn't a transaction. These are human beings, not a PR problem he can solve with his credit card. But Trent Noah was nothing if not persistent. The next week, his lawyer filed for custody and visitation rights. Kendall sat in Harrison's office, reading the petition, feeling her blood pressure rise with each word. He's claiming he was unaware of the children's existence, she said flatly, which is technically true. Which is a choice he made. She threw the papers down. He blocked my number. He refused to see me. His mother had me physically removed from the property when I tried to tell him I was pregnant. This isn't about awareness. This is about a man who decided I was guilty and didn't care about the truth. Harrison leaned back in his chair, studying her. Do you want me to destroy him in court? Because I can. His behavior leading up to and during your divorce was unconscionable. Any judge will see that. I want you to protect my sons. Kendall's voice was steel. I want you to make it clear that their father abandoned them and that he doesn't get to walk back into their lives just because it's convenient now. The preliminary hearing was a disaster for Trent. Kendall watched from her seat as Harrison methodically demolished every argument Trent's lawyer presented. The timeline of the divorce, the blocked phone number, the witness statements from Rosa about Megan having Kendall physically removed from the property, the fact that Trent had been planning a wedding to another woman while his sons were being born. The judge's face grew progressively more stern as the hearing continued. Mr. Noah, the judge said finally, removing her glasses and fixing him with a look that could freeze fire. You are asking this court to grant you access to children you have never met, children whose existence you were unaware of because, and I'm reading from the evidence here, you refused all contact with their mother after filing for divorce on grounds of infidelity that have since been proven false. Your Honor, Trent's lawyer stood. My client was deceived by his mother. Your client is a grown man who made his own choices. The judge shuffled papers. Petition denied. Mr. Noah has established no relationship with these children until such time as he can demonstrate a legitimate change in circumstances and the ability to put the children's needs before his own convenience. This court sees no reason to force Ms. Henry to allow access. Petition dismissed. Trent's face was white as he left the courtroom. Kendall refused to look at him. That night, her phone rang. Unknown number. But she answered because it might be a client. Kendall, his voice cracked. Please, just talk to me for 1 minute. She hung up immediately and blocked the number. But Trent Noah wasn't finished. He started appearing in her life like a ghost, never close enough to violate any boundaries, but impossible to ignore. He was at the park where she took the twins on Sunday mornings, sitting on a bench far away, just watching. He was at the grocery store she frequented, in a different aisle, but always visible. He was at the coffee shop where she worked sometimes, sitting in the corner with his laptop, never approaching, never speaking, just present. He's stalking you, Rosa said, concerned. He's making a point, Kendall corrected, though her hands shook as she poured coffee. He's showing me he's not giving up. Is it working? Kendall watched through the window as Trent sat in his car across the street, just watching the house where his sons lived. No, it's just making me angry. Weeks passed in this strange pattern, Trent maintaining his distance but never disappearing completely. No more legal filings, no more gifts, just his constant, quiet presence in the periphery of their lives. Then everything shifted one Tuesday afternoon. Kendall was juggling both boys at the pediatrician's office because Rosa was at her own doctor appointment. Jacob grabbed a toy from another child in the waiting room. The child cried. Jacob hit him when the child tried to take it back. Jacob, Noah, no! Kendall grabbed his hand, mortified. We don't hit. Apologize right now. Jacob's little face crumpled. No! She was trying to manage the situation, Joseph starting to fuss in sympathy with his brother, other parents watching with judgment, when a familiar voice spoke behind her. Jacob? She turned. Trent stood in the doorway of the waiting room, and his eyes were locked on his sons. This wasn't a coincidence. He'd learned where she took them for appointments. Part of her wanted to scream at him for the violation. But Jacob was still crying, Joseph was escalating, and she was exhausted and overwhelmed and alone. You need to leave, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I know, I'm sorry, He looked at Jacob, tears streaming down the little boy's face. Can I just... For a second, no. The word came out automatically, defensive, but something in his expression made her hesitate. He looked broken. desperate, nothing like the arrogant man who'd served her divorce papers. He left without arguing, but that night a single flower arrived at her door, no card, just one white rose. The siege continued. Weeks turned into a new season. Trent maintained his distance but never disappeared. He sent no more gifts, made no more legal filings. He just existed in their orbit, quiet and present, and clearly suffering. "He's changed," Rosa observed one Sunday as they watched him from the park bench. He was sitting in his usual spot, but this time he had a book. "He's not demanding anything. He's just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to decide if he's worth a chance." Rosa patted her hand. "I'm not saying give it to him. I'm just saying he's doing this differently than most men would." Kendall said nothing, but that night she stood at the window watching his car parked down the street. He sat there for hours sometimes, just looking at the house where his children slept. It should have felt threatening. Instead, it just felt sad. Chapter 7. The Professional Collision. She'd built an empire teaching people how to fix broken families, until fixing one meant saving the man who broke hers. The conference call with Gregory Turner was supposed to be routine. Kendall had been consulting for Turner Industries for months, helping the aging CEO navigate the transition of power to his children who couldn't agree on anything. It had been challenging but rewarding work, and her reputation in corporate family consulting had exploded because of it. "I have a unique situation," Gregory said, his voice tired over the phone. "There's a company facing a hostile takeover. The board is fractured because of family drama. They need someone who can come in and mediate before the whole thing collapses." "That's not usually my scope," Kendall said, making notes. "I do family dynamics, not corporate strategy." "This is family dynamics." The CEO's mother was on the board and apparently destroyed the company from within with her scheming. He removed her, but now the rest of the board doesn't trust him. Employees are terrified, and the whole thing is imploding. Gregory paused. "The company is Noah Enterprises." Kendall's pen stopped moving. "No. I know the history. That's why I'm calling you personally instead of just sending the contract over." Gregory's voice was gentle. "But Kendall, they're going to lose everything. Thousands of employees will be out of work if this company goes under, and the only way to save it is a merger with us, which means you'll be the mediator. Find someone else. There is no one else. You're the only consultant I trust with this level of complexity." He sighed. "Look, I know what he did to you. I know he doesn't deserve your help. But those employees do. And frankly, saving his company would be the ultimate power move, wouldn't it? Showing him you're successful enough, professional enough to save his legacy even after what he did to you." Kendall closed her eyes, hating that the argument made sense. "I'll charge triple my usual rate." "Done. Contract's being sent over now. First meeting is Monday morning, 9 sharp. Monday morning arrived with a thunderstorm that felt appropriately dramatic. Kendall dressed in her power suit, black tailored armor disguised as fashion, and left the twins with Rosa. She'd fed them breakfast, kissed their heads, and promised herself she could do this professionally. The Turner Industries conference room was all glass and steel, designed to intimidate. The Noah Enterprises team was already seated when she arrived. Their CFO, their head of operations, their legal counsel, and at the head of the table, Trent. He looked different than the last time she'd seen him up close. Thinner, tired. There were shadows under his eyes that makeup couldn't hide, and new lines around his mouth that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. Their eyes met across the table, and something flickered in his expression. Hope, maybe, or fear, or something else entirely that she couldn't name and didn't want to examine. "Good morning, gentlemen," Kendall said, setting her briefcase down and pulling out her materials with practiced efficiency. "I'm Kendall Henry, and I'll be facilitating this merger negotiation. Let's establish ground rules immediately. This is a professional engagement. Personal history stays outside this room. We're here to save your company and protect your employees, understood?" Everyone nodded. Trent last. "Good. Mr. Noah, would you like to begin by explaining how your company reached this critical point?" For the next several hours, They worked through the disaster Megan had created. She'd been funneling money to her niece's failing business ventures. She'd planted board members loyal to her rather than the company. She'd blocked beneficial partnerships because they might make Trent too independent of her control. It was systemic sabotage, masquerading as maternal concern, and it had nearly destroyed everything the Noah family had built over generations. Kendall listened, made notes, asked sharp questions that made the legal counsel sweat, and the CFO shift uncomfortably in his seat. She was ruthless and brilliant and completely professional, even when her questions made Trent squirm. "The merger with Turner Industries is your only option," she said finally, as the morning session ended. "But they won't agree unless we can prove you've eliminated the corruption completely. That means transparency audits, board restructuring, and likely some very painful personnel cuts of people your mother installed." "Whatever it takes," Trent said quietly. "This isn't about what you want, Mr. Noah. This is about those thousands of employees who trusted your family with their livelihoods." Her voice was ice. "Try to remember that." The negotiations stretched over weeks. Long, brutal weeks of 12-hour days dissecting every aspect of Noah Enterprises, finding the rot Megan had planted and cutting it out surgically. Kendall worked alongside Trent daily, and she had to admit, only to herself, only in the privacy of her own mind, that he'd changed. The arrogant, dismissive man who'd served her divorce papers was gone. This version asked questions instead of making assumptions. He listened to criticism without getting defensive. He took responsibility for his company's failures even when they weren't directly his fault. He treated his employees with respect and genuine concern for their welfare. "You're good at this," he said one night when they were the only ones left in the conference room. Takeout containers scattered between them, both exhausted from another marathon session reviewing financial documents. "Don't," Kendall said, not looking up from her laptop. "Don't what?" "Don't try to make this personal. We're colleagues on a project. That's all this is." He was quiet for a long moment. "Why did you take this job? You could have refused. You could have destroyed me by refusing, and everyone would have understood. Because thousands of people don't deserve to lose their jobs because you're an idiot." She finally looked at him. "This isn't for you, Trent. This is for them. For the single mothers working in your warehouses. For the fathers in your IT department. For everyone who depends on your company to feed their families." "I know." He looked down at his own work. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. For not listening. For believing her instead of you, for—" His voice cracked. "For missing everything. Their births. Their first year. I can't get that back. I know I can't get that back." "No, you can't." Kendall gathered her things. "And no amount of apologies will change that. I'm helping you save your company because it's the right thing to do. Not because I've forgiven you, not because I've forgotten, because it's right." She left him sitting alone in that conference room, and she didn't let herself look back, even though part of her wanted to. But weeks later, when the merger closed successfully and Noah Enterprises was saved, when Trent's employees crowded around thanking her for saving their jobs, when Gregory Turner shook her hand and told her she'd done the impossible, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not even close to that, but maybe, possibly, the tiniest crack in the armor she'd built so carefully around her heart. A recognition that the man sitting across from her in those late-night sessions wasn't the same man who destroyed her marriage. Whether that mattered remained to be seen. The final meeting was professional and brief. Contracts signed, handshakes exchanged, everyone celebrating except her. "Ms. Henry," Trent said as she packed her briefcase for the last time, "thank you. You saved my company, my employees' jobs, my family's legacy, everything." "I did my job, Mr. Noah." She snapped the briefcase closed with finality. "Our professional relationship is now complete. I trust we won't need to see each other again." She walked out of the Turner Industries building into the sunshine, feeling the weight of weeks of proximity finally lift from her shoulders. She'd done it. She'd worked alongside the man who'd destroyed her, and she'd stayed professional, stayed strong, stayed in control. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You just saved my life, and you won't even let me say thank you properly." You're remarkable, Kendall. I know I don't deserve to tell you that, but it's true. She deleted the message without responding and drove home to her sons, to Rosa, to the life she'd built without him. Let Trent Noah sit with his gratitude and his regret. She had better things to do than manage his feelings. Chapter 8. When the Fortress Cracks. She'd spent so long proving she didn't need him, and one phone call to prove she was still human. Seasons changed after the merger. Kendall's life had settled into a new rhythm. Her consulting business was thriving beyond anything she'd imagined, clients lining up after word spread about how she'd saved Noah Enterprises. The twins were growing into toddlers with distinct personalities, Jacob bold and demanding, Joseph gentle and thoughtful. Rosa's health had been steady, and for the first time since the divorce, Kendall felt like she could finally breathe without waiting for the next disaster. Then autumn arrived, and everything fell apart. It started with Rosa's cough. Just a small thing at first, easy to dismiss as allergies or changing weather. But it persisted, grew worse, deepened into something that rattled in her chest. Then one morning, Kendall found her collapsed in the kitchen, gasping for breath, her lips tinged with blue. "Hospital," Rosa wheezed. "Don't argue with me, baby girl." The doctors ran tests while Kendall sat in the waiting room with two confused toddlers trying to understand why Grandma Rosa wasn't coming home. The diagnosis was pneumonia, serious but treatable in younger patients. In someone Rosa's age, with her history of heart problems, it was dangerous. Very dangerous. "We'll keep her for observation," the doctor said. "Several days at least, possibly longer depending on how she responds to treatment." Kendall juggled everything that came next. Hospital visits, where she tried to keep the twins quiet and entertained in a place that terrified them. Work meetings she couldn't cancel because her clients depended on her. Caring for two energetic toddlers who didn't understand why their routine was disrupted. Keeping the house running, maintaining her business, returning client calls while preparing bottles and changing diapers, and explaining to Jacob why he couldn't see Grandma Rosa right now. She was surviving on minimal sleep, coffee that had gone cold hours ago, and pure determination not to let anything fall apart. Then Joseph got sick. Nothing serious in the grand scheme of things, just a stomach virus that toddlers caught from daycare, but it meant hours of laundry, cleaning, comforting a miserable child who didn't understand why he felt so bad. And then, as if the universe was testing her absolute limits, Jacob caught it too within days. The breaking point came on a Tuesday at 2 in the morning. Both twins were crying. Rosa was in the hospital, and Kendall stood in her living room holding two sick children and trying not to cry herself. She'd changed sheets multiple times already. She had a client presentation in the morning that she couldn't miss. Her phone was buzzing with emails marked urgent. Rosa's doctor had called saying there were complications with her recovery. She couldn't do this alone anymore. The thought was terrifying because she'd spent over a year proving she could do everything alone. Admitting she needed help felt like failure, like weakness, like surrendering the independence she'd fought so hard to build. But her sons were crying in her arms, and she was so tired she could barely stand. And Rosa was in the hospital worrying about them when she should be focusing on getting well. Kendall pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She hadn't deleted his number. She'd told herself it was practical. She might need to reach him in an emergency. But the truth was more complicated. The truth was that working alongside him for weeks had shown her a different version of Trent, and she hadn't known what to do with that information. The phone rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. "Kendall?" His voice was alert immediately, worried in a way that suggested he'd been awake. "Are you okay? Are the boys okay?" "They're sick, both of them. Everything at once." Her voice broke despite her best efforts to stay strong. "And Rosa's in the hospital with pneumonia, and I have a presentation in the morning that I can't miss, and I just—" The words tumbled out in a rush. "I can't do this alone anymore, I can't. I'm coming. Give me your address." No hesitation, no conditions, no questions, just immediate action. "You probably don't remember. I remember. I've driven past every day for months. I'm 15 minutes away." He made it in 12. Kendall opened the door to find him standing there in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair messy from sleep, and his eyes full of something she couldn't name and didn't have the energy to analyze. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion, the tears, the breaking point. "Tell me what you need," he said quietly. "Joseph is in the bathroom. He can't keep anything down. Jacob is in the nursery crying because he's miserable and doesn't understand why. The laundry is overflowing because I've changed sheets so many times tonight I've lost count. I have a presentation at 8 that I can't miss, and Rosa is in the hospital and I need to call them back, but I haven't had time." "Okay." He stepped inside, not waiting for permission. "I'll take the boys. You call the hospital about Rosa. Then you're going to sleep for at least 2 hours while I handle everything else. You don't know how to... I'll figure it out." He was already moving toward the nursery. "I'm their father, Kendall. Let me be their father." She was too tired to argue, too overwhelmed to maintain her walls. Over the next 8 hours, Kendall watched through exhausted eyes as Trent proved himself in ways she hadn't expected. He sat with Joseph through another bout of sickness, murmuring comfort and wiping his face with gentle hands that seemed to know instinctively what to do. He rocked Jacob until the toddler finally fell asleep against his chest, exhausted from crying. He did laundry without being asked, made Pedialyte popsicles from a recipe he Googled, cleaned bathrooms, and handled midnight crises with a patience she hadn't known he possessed. Dawn came, and the twins were finally sleeping peacefully in their cribs. Kendall had gotten 2 hours of sleep on the couch while Trent watched over them. Her presentation materials were organized because he'd taken care of that too. Coffee was brewing, filling the house with a familiar comfort. They sat in the kitchen, silent and exhausted, watching the sun rise through Rosa's lace curtains. "Thank you," Kendall said finally. "You don't have to thank me. They're my sons." He looked at her and his eyes were raw with emotion. "I know you didn't call me because you wanted to. You called me because you were out of options. I know that. But Kendall, I want to be an option, not just in emergencies. I want to be someone you can count on. You weren't before." "I know, and I can't change that." He set down his coffee cup. "But I can show up now, every time, however you need me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to prove I've changed, to prove I can be the father they deserve." She wanted to say no, wanted to push him away, rebuild her walls, go back to managing everything alone because alone was safe. Alone meant she couldn't be betrayed again. But she was so tired. And he'd shown up, and her sons had slept peacefully in their father's arms for the first time in their lives. "Rosa's in the hospital," she said, instead of answering directly. "St. Mary's. If you're serious about helping, she needs someone to sit with her during visiting hours while I handle the presentation and the boys. I'll go right now. She doesn't like you. I don't like me either most days." He stood, grabbing his keys. "But she loves you and the boys, and she needs someone there. I can take being hated if it helps her get better." He left, and Kendall sat alone in Rosa's kitchen, listening to her sons breathe peacefully in their cribs upstairs, and felt the first crack in the fortress she'd built around her heart. Not forgiveness, not yet. Forgiveness would take time and consistency and proof that this wasn't just a performance, but maybe, possibly, the beginning of something like hope. Chapter 9. The slow thaw trust isn't rebuilt in a moment. It's reconstructed brick by brick, day by day, in the smallest acts of showing up. The text came while Kendall was in a client meeting weeks after the midnight crisis. "Jacob's sick. Daycare called. Can I get him?" She stared at her phone, her client still talking about quarterly projections that suddenly seemed less important, and felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Letting Trent pick up their son meant admitting he was part of their lives now. It meant trusting him with Jacob's health, his safety, his care. It meant letting go of control. She typed back, "Yes, call me when you have him." Her client noticed her distraction. "Everything okay?" "My son is sick. His father is picking him up from daycare. The words felt strange in her mouth. His father, not Trent or my ex-husband, or any of the other ways she'd referred to him over the past months. His father, as if that meant something now. The months following that first crisis call developed into a pattern that felt almost normal, though Kendall remained cautious. Trent showed up when she needed him and respectfully disappeared when she didn't. Sunday dinners at Rosa's house, with Rosa supervising like a hawk who'd seen too many men promise change and deliver nothing. Tuesday pickups when Kendall had late meetings, emergency calls when one of the twins needed something urgent and she was across town. He never pushed for more, never demanded overnight visits or formal custody arrangements. He just existed in their orbit, steady and consistent, proving through actions rather than words that he'd changed. "He's different," Rosa admitted one Sunday after dinner. She'd been home from the hospital for weeks now, still recovering but stronger every day. "I've known that man since he was a boy. This version? I've never seen him before." "People don't really change," Kendall said, watching through the window as Trent pushed both boys on the swings in Rosa's backyard. They were laughing, reaching for him, calling, "Higher, Daddy, higher," with absolute trust. "People don't change their core," Rosa corrected, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd seen decades of human nature. "But they can change their choices. He's choosing differently now. The question is whether you believe it'll last." The real test came in early spring when the flowers were just beginning to bloom. Kendall was in her office when her receptionist buzzed through. "There's a Megan Noah here to see you. She says it's urgent and she won't leave." Kendall's entire body went cold. "Tell her I'm not available. She's saying she won't leave until you see her. Should I call security?" Before Kendall could answer, her office door burst open. Megan Noah swept in, older than Kendall remembered, but still imperious, still carrying herself like royalty, confronting a peasant who'd forgotten her place. "We need to talk," Megan announced. "We have nothing to discuss. Leave now, or I'll have you removed." Kendall stood, reaching for her phone. "I want to see my grandsons." The audacity of it stole Kendall's breath for a moment. "You want to what?" "They're my family, my blood. You can't keep them from me forever." Megan's voice took on a wheedling tone that probably worked on other people. "I made mistakes, I admit that, but I'm their grandmother. They deserve to know me. Every child deserves to know their family." "They deserve better than you." Kendall's voice was ice. "You destroyed their family before they were born. You lied to your son, manipulated him into abandoning his pregnant wife, tried to ruin me professionally and personally, and you think I'm going to let you anywhere near them? I'll pay you." Megan pulled out a checkbook like this was a business transaction. "Name your price. I just want to meet them, spend time with them. They're not for sale." Kendall came around her desk, fury giving her strength. "You stole their father from them for over a year. You made sure they grew up without him. You tried to destroy their mother, and now you think you can buy your way back in. I'm their grandmother. You're nothing to them. You're the woman who broke their family, the woman who fabricated evidence to destroy their parents' marriage, the woman who would poison their lives the moment you got access to them." Kendall's voice rose. "Now get out of my office before I call the police." Megan's face twisted with rage, the mask finally dropping completely. "Trent will forgive me eventually. He always does. And when he does, I'll have access to those boys whether you like it or not." "Then he won't have access to them either." Kendall's voice was absolute, final. "If Trent chooses you over them, he loses them forever. Those are my terms. Now leave before I have you arrested for trespassing." Megan left, but not before threatening lawsuits and making dramatic pronouncements about family loyalty and blood ties. Kendall stood in her office, shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Her phone rang within minutes. "Trent, did my mother come to your office?" His voice was tight, controlled anger barely contained. "How did you know?" "She called me bragging about it, said she'd made you an offer you couldn't refuse, that you'd see reason eventually." He exhaled heavily. "Kendall, I'm so sorry. I'll handle this immediately." "No." Her voice was firm. I handled it, but Trent, you need to understand something. If you ever choose her over our sons, if you ever give her access to them in any way, we're done. You're done. I will disappear with them, and you'll never find us. I would never. Your mother just showed up at my workplace and tried to buy access to my children. She violated a restraining order to do it. She's escalating, and she won't stop. Kendall sat down heavily. This is your chance to prove which side you're on. Choose carefully. I'm on their side, always. He was quiet for a moment. I'm calling my lawyer right now. She violated the restraining order. I'm having her arrested. Trent. She had a choice. She could have left you alone, left them alone, respected the boundaries we set. She chose to violate them. His voice was steel. She doesn't get to hurt you again. She doesn't get to hurt them ever. I'm done protecting her from consequences. 2 hours later, Kendall received a call from Trent's lawyer, confirming that Megan had been arrested for violating the restraining order. The charges would likely result in a court appearance, possible fines or jail time, and a stronger order of protection. He did it, Rosa said that evening when Kendall told her what happened. He chose you and the boys over his mother. That's not nothing, baby girl. That's everything. That night, after the twins were asleep, Kendall stood on Rosa's porch watching the street. Trent's car pulled up right on schedule for what had become his evening visit. 30 minutes to tuck in the boys, read them a story, be present in their lives. He walked up the path, and she saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight of what he'd done to his own mother sitting heavy on his shoulders. Thank you, she said before he could speak, for protecting them. She's my mother. His voice was hollow. I had her arrested. She's also the woman who destroyed your family and tried to harm your children. Kendall touched his arm, the first deliberate physical contact they'd had in years. You made the right choice. He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and something passed between them, something that felt like understanding. Can I tell you something? What? Watching you with them, seeing what an incredible mother you are, knowing you built all this alone while I was being the world's biggest idiot. His voice cracked. You're the strongest person I've ever met, and I'm the biggest fool for not seeing it from the beginning. Trent, I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. He moved toward the door. I'm going to say goodnight to the boys if that's okay. She nodded, and he went inside. Kendall stood on the porch for a long time after he left, hand over her heart, feeling something she thought was long dead beginning to wake up. Not love, not yet. Love required more time, more proof, more evidence that this change was permanent. But maybe, possibly, the foundation on which love could be carefully, slowly, painstakingly rebuilt. Chapter 10. The home they built from ruins. Some love stories end where they begin. Others end where they become something entirely new, something earned, something real. The job offer came on a Tuesday morning when summer was giving way to autumn. Kendall stared at the email from Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious consulting firms on the West Coast. They wanted her as a senior partner, full benefits, generous signing bonus, triple her current salary. The catch: she'd need to relocate to Seattle. It was everything she'd worked toward: security for her sons, recognition for her abilities, proof that she'd risen from the ashes of her divorce and built something extraordinary. What are you going to do? Rosa asked, watching Kendall read the email for the 4th time. I don't know. Kendall looked around Rosa's kitchen, the house that had been her refuge, the place where she'd rebuilt her life from nothing. The twins were in the backyard, Trent pushing them on the swings during his afternoon visit. This is everything I wanted professionally. Financial security beyond anything I imagined, a major career advancement. But they're happy here. They have routines. They have their father now. Kendall's voice dropped. Moving would mean taking them away from him again. It would mean starting over somewhere new, building a new support system, disrupting everything we've created. He could move to Seattle, Rosa pointed out. He has a company here, employees depending on him. His whole life is in this city. Kendall closed her laptop. I can't ask him to give that up. It wouldn't be fair. So you'll give up your dream instead? I'm building my own firm here. It's not a dream job with someone else. It's my dream, built my way, on my own terms. Kendall smiled. That seems worth more than any salary they could offer. That evening she asked Trent to stay after he tucked in the boys. They sat on Rosa's porch, the summer air warm and filled with the sounds of evening settling in around them. I got a job offer today, she said. Seattle, big firm, big money, big opportunity. His face went carefully blank. That's amazing. Congratulations. I turned it down. He looked at her sharply. Why would you do that? Because I'm building something here that matters more than money or prestige. My own firm, my own clients, my own reputation earned through my own work. She met his eyes. And because uprooting the boys from their father seemed cruel after we've all worked so hard to build this. Kendall, if this is what you want for your career, I want them to have both parents. She cut him off. I want them to know their father, to have Sunday dinners and Tuesday pickups and bedtime stories from you. I want them to see that adults can make mistakes and fix them, that families can break and heal, that love is about choices, not just feelings. He was quiet for a long moment. What about what you want? Not for them, for you. It was the question she'd been avoiding, the truth she'd been afraid to speak out loud even to herself. I want to see if we can be more than co-parents. Not the us we were. That couple is dead and buried and I'm not interested in resurrection. But maybe a new us, built on truth this time instead of assumptions. Can you ever love me again? His voice was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard before. I don't know. Kendall's honesty felt like the most important gift she could give him. But I'm willing to try. For us, not just for them. Because you've shown up every single day for almost a year now. You chose our sons over your mother. You've been patient when I was cruel, consistent when I was cold, present when I wanted you gone. I'm still sorry, he said. Every single day I'm sorry for what I did. I know, and I'm working on forgiveness. Therapy helps. She smiled slightly. Our therapist says we're making progress. Our therapist? He looked surprised. You thought I was doing all this self-growth alone? I've been in therapy since the twins were born, processing the divorce, the abandonment, learning to trust again. She paused. I started couples therapy months ago. You just haven't been attending in person. Your proxy has been behavioral change. Behavioral change. Actions speak louder than words, Trent. You've been proving yourself in every moment, every choice. That's been your therapy work. Showing up, being present, making different choices than before. She reached over and took his hand. And it's working. Seasons changed. They started dating, slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries, and continued therapy. Not living together because Kendall wasn't ready for that, but Friday dinners that felt like dates. Saturday mornings at the park that looked like a family. Sunday evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing while the boys slept inside. They were building something new, and it was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The twins' third birthday party was chaos in the best way. Rosa's backyard filled with children from daycare, neighbors, Kendall's colleagues, even some of Trent's employees who'd become friends. The boys ran wild with cake-sticky faces, playing with their new toys, surrounded by people who loved them. Daddy live here now? Jacob asked in the middle of the party, his voice loud enough to make nearby conversations stop. Kendall and Trent exchanged glances. They'd been navigating this question for weeks. He'd been staying over more, leaving work clothes in the guest room, keeping toiletries in the bathroom, but they hadn't made it official, hadn't had the conversation about what came next. Would you like that? Kendall asked carefully. Yes! Both boys shouted in unison, jumping up and down with enthusiasm. It's your home, Trent said, looking only at Kendall. Your call. Always your call. She thought about the girl who'd signed divorce papers alone in an empty apartment, the woman who'd given birth without her husband beside her, The mother who'd built a life from nothing but will and Rosa's kindness and her own refusal to be broken. That woman had needed her fortress, her armor, her absolute control over every aspect of her life. But maybe she wasn't that woman anymore. Maybe she was someone new, someone stronger because she'd learned when to let people in, when to accept help, when to risk trusting again. "It's our home," Kendall said, pulling a key from her pocket. She'd had it made weeks ago, waiting for the right moment, the right feeling in her chest. "It has been for a while. I just needed to be ready to say it out loud." She handed him the key. "Welcome home, Trent." He took it, and his hands were shaking. "Thank you for giving me another chance to get it right." "Just don't waste it," she said, but she was smiling. That night, after the party ended and the boys were finally asleep, exhausted from celebration, Kendall and Trent sat on the porch in the darkness, watching fireflies dance across Rosa's yard. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know I don't have the right to say that. I know I destroyed the first version of us. But this new us, this family we're building piece by piece, I love every part of it. I love who you've become. I love who we're becoming together." "I'm not there yet," Kendall said honestly, because honesty was the foundation they were building on. "I care about you deeply. I trust you, which is enormous. But love? That takes more time to rebuild after it's been shattered." "I'll wait." He squeezed her hand. "I'll wait however long it takes." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence while Rosa watched from the kitchen window, smiling to herself. Years ago, Trent Noah had destroyed the woman he loved. Today, he was building a life with the woman she'd become, stronger, wiser, unwilling to settle for anything less than the love she deserved. And this time, he knew, she wasn't his second chance. He was hers, and he would spend every day proving he was worthy of it. The future wasn't perfect. There would be hard conversations ahead, old wounds that still needed healing, trust that would take years to fully restore. Kendall knew there would be moments when the past would resurface, when doubts would creep in, when she'd have to consciously choose to stay rather than run. But they were building it together, on a foundation of truth, accountability and time, on actions instead of promises, on showing up instead of just saying sorry. In Rosa's backyard, two little boys slept peacefully, knowing both their parents would be there in the morning. And that, Kendall thought as Trent kissed her forehead, was a kind of happy ending after all. Just not the one she'd imagined all those years ago when she'd walked down the aisle. Something better, something real, something earned through pain and growth and the choice to try again, something theirs.